Now, originally I said I was going to get this video up last night, but then after the Clone Wars panel I took a little break to collect my thoughts, because there was a lot of good stuff to process, and before I knew it, Game of Thrones was on, and well, here we are the next day. Anyway, let's just jump right into it and discuss what we learned about Clone Wars Season 7, starting with the fact that it looks like we're going to be getting 3 story arcs in this final season, the first being one we've already seen before, albeit in an incomplete form, that being the Bad Batch story arc, which is about Clone Force 99, a squad of clones that didn't turn out quite like the rest, having different physical appearances from all the others and each other, as well as unique personalities and skill sets, and now together they make up an elite unit, and one Cody and Rex will have to work with to recover a separatist algorithm. And though, yes, I did enjoy the arc when I first saw it a few years back now in its crude form, and it's nice that it's going to be finished up, I honestly would have rather gotten one we hadn't seen before in any form, or maybe one of the arcs we've only really been teased about, like the Boba Fett and Cad Bane arc. But hey, I'm just happy to be getting this last season, this ending to the Clone Wars series, and I'll take whatever they want to give us. And next up, we're going to be given an arc about what Ahsoka will be doing pretty much immediately after she leaves the Jedi Order, which we saw at the end of Season 5, about how she begins to cope with the change from her old life as she looks for a new place in the world, which, even though I'm a huge fan of Ahsoka, might not be my first choice for arcs, but then when I really stop and think about it, it does make a lot of sense that they'd include this. Because in many ways, the Clone Wars is her show, or her story. It's the journey she takes that begins with her being a smug young Padawan, to becoming a far more mature and wise character, and one who ultimately has the courage to walk away from the only thing she's ever known in her life, because she's lost faith in it. And she also thinks everyone other than Anakin had lost faith in her, which is why I love that scene that they did show us, where the clones honor her when she comes back, by repainting their helmets, and that Rex refuses to not address her as Commander. It's a great throwback to the first time those two characters met, when Ahsoka tells Rex that technically she outranks him, which she does, but he tells her that in his book, experience outranks everything. In other words, he calls her Commander now not because of what rank she technically does or does not have, but because she's now long since earned not only a rank, but his respect, and the respect of all the other troopers in the 501st. And so I think this arc about her is a good one to include, because it will show how Ahsoka had to adjust to a life not only away from the Jedi Order, but away from the war that had been completely dictating her training as a Jedi, and her life in general. And seeing how she begins to adjust will be an important part of her overall character progression, as she moves towards the character we'll one day see in Rebels. Finally then, we'll be getting the Siege of Mandalore story arc, which actually not only leads into the events of Revenge of the Sith, but concludes during those events. In other words, much of this arc will mirror what's going on during Episode 3, and we'll be able to see how things play out from a different point of view. It's basically all about trying to remove Maul from Mandalore. Dave Filoni also said during the panel that this is basically going to be the biggest, most ambitious story arc they've ever done in the history of the show, and no surprise, this is the one I'm most excited for, especially after being promised the best saber battle we've seen yet in the Clone Wars, that being between Maul and Ahsoka. And mind you, that's quite a promise to make, considering all the great ones we did get over the years, like Savage and Maul vs. Sidious, which won the poll I put up a while back, asking which was the best saber battle in Clone Wars. But of course what's likely to put this one over the top is not just that it's Maul vs. Ahsoka, which already sounds pretty cool, but it's because Ray Park, who played Maul in The Phantom Menace, was put into a motion capture suit for this, meaning it will be the real Darth Maul in this episode, and as they said at the panel, there's just something about the way Ray Park moves as Maul that I don't think could be captured any other way. And in the brief 2-second clip of the fight that we got in the trailer, it already looked to have a fluidity that we've never seen before out of the Clone Wars. Furthermore, he'll be voiced by what many would call the other half of Darth Maul, that being Sam Witwer, who voiced him in Clone Wars, Rebels, and Solo. Though no disrespect intended to Peter Serafinowicz, who originally voiced him in Episode 1. Anyway, this is where I'll avoid making a bad joke or pun about two halves of Maul coming together to make one. And instead point out that, despite how secretive Filoni was at the panel about what happens at the Siege of Mandalore, and has apparently been that way for years, we actually know quite a bit about it thanks to a book that came out a few years back now called Ahsoka, which dealt with her life after Order 66, and how she became a fulcrum agent for the early rebellion. But there were several short chapters or interludes that flashed back to the Siege of Mandalore and revealed quite a bit about it. And what we'll be curious to see is if they change anything from the book, which is, of course, considered 100% canon right now, or if they'll just hold true to it, which I actually think they will. But honestly, there's a lot of spoilers in that book for the Siege of Mandalore story arc that we're about to get. And no, I'm not going to get into them here for the sake of those who haven't read the book and maybe want to be completely surprised when they watch the show later this year. Anyway, moving on now, what may have amazed me the most about the clips we saw and the trailer was how good it all looks. Because when the show first started over 10 years ago now, which is hard to believe, or started with the Clone Wars movie, I should say, the animation looked good, I guess, and then as the years and seasons went by, it got better and better, to the point where in the later seasons it started to look really, really good. And there was a night and day difference between the early seasons and those later ones. And as Filoni talked about, going back to the Clone Wars wasn't easy for them. It wasn't like they could just flip a switch, literally and figuratively, and start doing that animation style all over again. And one of the things I was really curious to see going into this panel is if the new season maybe wouldn't look quite as good as it had in the past, which I would have forgiven them for. Again, I'm just happy to be getting this final season and a true end to the show. But unless my mind is playing tricks on me, the animation actually looks a fair amount better than it did even in those later seasons, and considering I'm always randomly watching episodes and arcs from the Clone Wars, I feel safe saying it's not just that I'm not remembering well, it's that they really have taken it up a notch, and of course, they did mention they'd gone in and added new subtle details here and there. But wow, it looks incredible, and I'd be lying to you if that trailer didn't get me a little misty-eyed, because this is going to be the Clone Wars we all know, love, and remember, and any fears I may have had about them getting this wrong for one reason or another, well, they're all completely gone now. And what maybe makes me a little bit sad about all of this is to be reminded of just how incredible Star Wars animation can look, that it could be getting better and better as the years are going by. Instead, we're getting shows that look like Resistance. And believe me, I do get that Resistance doesn't have anywhere near the same production budget that the Clone Wars had back in the day and that they clearly had for this last season, and they're working with what they've got. There's no doubt a ton of talented people who work on the animation for Resistance, and I don't mean them any harm or to rip on them. It's just that, and I know I've brought this up before, but one thing Star Wars has always done, and should do in my opinion, is push boundaries of what can be done, and Resistance doesn't do that. Though in all fairness, neither did Rebels, but I still did like the general look and feel of the show, and how they consistently used old Ralph McQuarrie art, who was the one who designed much of the original trilogy. And in the grand scheme of things, I guess I'd rather have Disney and Lucasfilm put more money into the live-action shows like The Mandalorian, which does look fantastic, than in their animated shows. It's a trade I'm willing to make, and that's coming from someone who was a huge fan of the Clone Wars and also highly enjoyed Rebels, and still has some hope for Resistance that it'll get better in Season 2. And hell, if the panel for it today looks good, I'll probably make a video about it at some point. Nevertheless, though, willing to give up incredible looking animated Star Wars shows does come with one stipulation from me, not that they care what I think, but I'd like to see them still give us some amazing Star Wars animation every so often. I'd like to see them keep pushing the boundaries of what can be done with animated Star Wars, like perhaps once a year or maybe even every other year. Give us a new animated movie with the same quality, or even better, than the Clone Wars had. It can even be on the streaming service, or after the success of a movie like Into the Spider-Verse, why not try putting it into theaters? I mean, I don't know about you, but if they gave us an animated movie about Ahsoka and Sabine hunting down Ezra, and they did it in Clone Wars style animation and stuck it on Disney Plus, or maybe sent it straight to Blu-ray, I'd be one happy Star Wars fan. Or hell, make it a short season 5 of Rebels like they did with Clone Wars. Because really, I think it's a shame that Star Wars can look so incredible in the animated form, and we're not going to get any more of it beyond season 7 of the Clone Wars, at least not that we know of. Then again, they're not going to keep pushing forward with it and only go backwards in appearance in future shows like they have with Resistance. And in closing here, let me just say that this has been perhaps one of the best moves Lucasfilm has made in the Disney era, bringing back the Clone Wars, I mean. After canceling the show before it was completed was maybe one of their worst. Because a lot of fans discovered Star Wars through the Clone Wars. A lot of people grew up with that show. And then there's a lot of fans like me who have been here since the days of the original trilogy, who also loved the show and were not so happy to see it so abruptly end. And as I said earlier, I don't have any fears about this being good or what we remember from the Clone Wars. This is Dave Filoni and company returning to a passion project. I'm just as excited about getting to finish this show as we fans are to see it. And what really stuck out from the panel, beyond the incredible trailer and the 3 scenes we got, was the love for Star Wars from all involved. And that's really what made this show great in the first place, and what we fans want to see. We want to see those who love Star Wars making it, and just as excited about what they do as we are getting to see it. Well, that's all I've got for this time. Now it's your turn to tell me how excited you are for the return of Clone Wars after the panel and trailer we just got. Are you happy about the story arcs we're getting, or would you have preferred different ones? Let me know in the comments below, and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.